Good day, grade 12 learners, and welcome to today's e-file paper 3 lesson. My name is Sipati Ratebe. This lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Cybono Discovery Center. Kindly note that we do have a WhatsApp interactive number, and the number is 064 748 8913. I repeat, 064 748 8913. Please feel free to interact with us from that number. Today's lesson is basically on paper 3. Remember, this paper carries the highest mark, which is 100, as compared to the other two papers where one is out of 70 and the other out of 80. So given this weighting, you should spend more time on learning creativity. You also need to spend more time practicing and improving your writing skills, as well as the format of different transactional text. It is also important to know that you can actually get 100 out of 100. However, that would require you to spend more time on learning creativity, as well as the formats of different transactional text. Let's do a quick recap about the structure of paper 3. Remember, section A and section B, they have already been dealt with in the past weeks. But let us quickly look at the recap here. The paper comprises of 3 sections, which are as follows. We've got section A, which is the essay consisting of 50 marks with a word count of 250 to 300 words. We also have section B, which is transactional writing consisting of 30 marks with a word count of 120 to 150 words. And lastly, we have section C, which is our shorter transactional writing consisting of 20 marks with a word count of 80 to 100 words. Each of these sections is given different time. Let's have a look at the time allocation then. For section A, you are expected to spend approximately 80 minutes. For section B, you are expected to spend approximately 40 minutes. And for section C, you are expected to spend approximately 30 minutes. Like I have indicated earlier that section A as well as section B has been treated in the past weeks. So today we will only focus on section C, which is our shorter transactional writing. The following categories will appear in your question paper. We have category A, which is our 3.1. 3.2 will be category B, and 3.3 is category C. Let's have a look at category A. This category is being formed by advertisement, invitation, flyer, and a poster. What about category B? In this category, we find diary entries, short message systems, namely WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, etc. And the last category of this section is category C. This is made of instructions as well as directions. What are the requirements for this section? Remember to always start this section on a new page. You will be expected to answer only one question in this section. 3 questions will be set, one from each of the given categories, that is category A, category B, as well as category C. Let's have a look at the exam instructions. Choose only one shorter transactional text from the ones given. The body of your response should be between 80 and 100 words in length. Write down the number and the heading of your text you have chosen. For example, 3.1 invitation card. It is very important that you carry out these exam instructions. You need not write more than one shorter transactional text from this section. You also need to be mindful of the length of the text. It should be between 80 to 100. You need to number the heading of the text that you would have chosen. That is also important. Remember, no marks are awarded for pictures, sketches, etc. Remember to plan, to edit and proofread your text, clearly indicating planning and cross it out before submitting. It is very important that you cross it out before you submit. Your shorter transactional text will be assessed according to a 20 marks rubric. You need to pay particular attention to the format, the language, as well as register. Let's have a look at the weighting of our rubric there. Like I indicated in the previous slide, that the shorter transactional pieces will be assessed according to the following criteria, which is the content, planning, and format, which carries 12 marks. And that gives us a 60% of the text. We also have the language, style, and editing mark, which is 8, and that carries 40% of the text. And all of that will give us a 20, which is the total mark for the text. What are the things that you need to look at when judging the content of your text? The first thing that you've got to look at is the response to the topic. Your response to the topic. Have you responded well to the topic? The second thing that you need to look at it is the ideas. Are the ideas relevant to the topic? And lastly, you've got to look at organization and coherence. Are the ideas well organized? Is there some kind of a synergy between your ideas? Is there a clear correlation of the ideas that you would have put across? That is also important, or that is one of the things that we look at when we judge content. And what things do we look at when we judge language? These are the things to look at when judging language. You've got to look at the tone. We also look at the vocabulary. And lastly, we look at the language. Remember, vocabulary informs language, and language determines the tone. So it is very important that you acquire more vocabulary in terms of the language, and that in its own will, in one or the other, inform the tone of the text. What questions do you need to ask yourself after you have answered the brief? After you have read the brief, ask yourself, have I answered the question? If so, how well have I answered the question? To measure how well you have responded to the brief, you've got to refer to your checklist, which I believe by now you are familiar with checklists of different transactional text, as well as or the guidelines for the text. So those are the two aspects that you've got to refer to, the checklist or the guidelines for the text. That is our rubric for section C, which carries 20 marks. As I've explained earlier, that our content, planning, and format mark is out of 12. And then we've got the language style and editing, which is also out of 8, giving us a total of 20. If you look at that rubric, you can see that we do have 5 categories there. And those categories are clearly marked by the total for each and every category. Let's take, for example, the first category there, which in many cases is being referred to as the wow category or the exceptional category. That category carries marks from 10 to 12. So if you are being given a 10 out of 12, or you are given 11 out of 12, or even a 12 out of 12, that is attainable, by the way. That means your pace is exceptionally well. And there are descriptors in each of those categories that will qualify you to get a 12 out of 12, 11 out of 12, a 10 out of 12 for that matter, for content mark. Then we do have a lower category to that, which is called a very good one or skillful category. And that ranges from 8 to 9 marks. Below that one, below the skillful, we have average or moderate category. The marks thereof ranges from 6 to 7. And the next category is the elementary one. In this category, that is where you would not clearly focus on the brief, but you would only have some elements that will support the brief, whereas other elements would be not in line with the brief. So we would find some kind of a digression there, and that is called elementary. And lastly, we have the last category there, which is inadequate category, or in some instances, they call it a category which falls under poor performance. So those are the 5 categories that the rubric is being used for to give you marks. I would love to believe that by now you have interacted with the rubric and you have looked at all the descriptors in those categories and you clearly understand how you are being awarded a mark when it comes to section C. Right, let's have a look at our category A, which is an advertisement, an invitation card, a flyer, as well as a poster. What is a flyer or a poster? A poster or flyer is used as a means of advertising. The difference is that a flyer is physically handed to target group. Sometimes it's being put on car windscreens or in post boxes. The information thereof is arranged in an attractive and appealing language, and an eye-catching heading represent the subject. Very clear and concise information is used because the text is limited. We also use personal and emotive tone in order to influence the reader. Remember, the main aim here is to influence the reader. The main aim here is to catch the attention of the reader. You must also include there the contact numbers or the address. That has to be shared with the reader as well. What information should then be included? Let's have a look at the first thing that you need to include. It is the headline or the title. It is important that your advert, your poster, or your flyer has a headline or a title. The headline must capture the attention of the target audience. You need to create a catchy phrase using as few words as possible. Secondly, there's the content. This is what you need to include. In a few sentences, you give vital information to keep the attention of the reader. You need to tell what the event or business or product is all about. And thirdly, you should also include some form of a call to action. Say exactly why people should contact your business and what you can do for them. You need to inspire action. The fourth thing that you need to include there is the contact information. Include contact information, that is the date, the time, and venue of the event in case of an event. You also need to include the contact person and details. That could be cell phone number or a website address. What other information can we include here? We can also include a slogan. So you will create a slogan which has a catchy phrase. What should not be included? Any pictures or drawing. I know most of you love drawing, you love colors. However, don't spend most of your time drawing pictures, drawing invites, drawing advertisement. That, unfortunately, will not award you any mark. It will just be a waste of time. No slang or colloquial language should be used. Let's do a quick recap on category A, which is an advert, a flyer, or a poster. It must have a catchy headline to attract the attention of the reader. It needs to inspire some action. It should make the reader to want to do whatever that you want them to do. It needs to create interest in and the desire for the product. The reader must feel like, I want to have this. The reader must be interested in the product. The target market should be very clear. The language may be formal or informal, but not slang or colloquial. A description of the product or the company or the service or even the event should be clearly highlighted there. The brand name as well as the slogan, where applicable, should be included. You also need to provide contact information. If it is an event, the details of the venue and the date should be provided. If it is a product, or the service that you render or a company, you need to provide information on where to find it. Let's have a look at the checklist. That is an example of a checklist of a poster or a flyer. This will assist you to see if you have included all the necessary aspects that are needed in a flyer or in a poster. If you look at our checklist, you've got an activity there on your left hand side, then you've got a yes column, a no column, as well as a comment column. So you will look at your poster and see if you have an eye-catching heading, a heading that is inviting. If yes, you will then tick under yes. If no, you will then tick under no, and then write a comment. The heading is there, however, it is not eye-catching. However, it is not inviting. It doesn't make the reader to want to know more about that which would be on the poster or the flyer. A description of the product, a description of the company, a description of the service, or an event is given. Depending on what you would be advertising on that poster or flyer, a description of that which you will be advertising must be clearly indicated on that poster. The same will apply. If it is there, you will tick with your under the yes column or the no column and write a comment. The strong purpose to advertise is very clear. Why are you advertising whatever that you are advertising? Why are you advertising the product? Why are you advertising the company or the service that you are rendering? Or whatever event that is, why are you doing that? So the purpose thereof should be very clear, short and very clear. The language used, you check whether the language that you have used persuades and convinces the reader. So your choice of words, the vocab that you have used is very, very important because it will either persuade the reader or not persuade the reader. It will make the reader to want to know more about the product or not really want to know more about the product. So the language used should persuade and convince the reader. The message is simple and short. Avoid long sentences. It has to be simple and short. Remember, the aim is for the reader to understand exactly what you say. You don't want to write long messages, which at the end of it, they lose meaning and you don't reach the objective that which you intended to. You also include the contact number or the address. Like I said, that will also depend on the product, the company, the service, or the event that you will be advertising. So look at that checklist. It will help you many a times when you come to doing your self-assessment or your peer assessment activity. Right. Let's have a look at the invitation. Remember, the invitation falls under category A as well. And I know that most of us are familiar with invitations because more often we get some invites from friends, from family, inviting us to a number of occasions. So we are all familiar with this. What is actually an invitation? This is a short text that conveys a message. How to write an invitation? You need to read the question carefully and identify the subject of the invitation. E.g., is it a wedding? Is it a graduation? Is it a birthday? Is it unveiling of a tombstone? It is important that you are able to identify the subject of the invitation. Include the subject of the invitation. So you need to include the nature of the event, like I have highlighted earlier, whether it's a wedding celebration, a graduation ceremony, a birthday party, whatever that is, it needs to be clearly indicated on the invitation, the nature of the event. You need to include the date, you need to include the venue, you need to include the time at which the occasion will start. Those three aspects are very, very important: date, venue, and time. Include RSVP, and that's the contact details for confirmation of attendance, the dress code has to be included as well, and other relevant information, anything that you might find relevant to the invite. It could be that you don't want, if it's a wedding celebration, you wouldn't really love kids to attend. Then that would be some of the information that you can include in your invite. What register and what style? Before we get into that, let's try to understand, what do we mean by register and what do we mean by style? Register refers to the degree of formality. It must be acceptable for the audience and purpose. So that is the register. The degree of formality, it has to be acceptable to the audience and the purpose thereof. The invitation should be clear and straightforward. It should be concise and to the point. And what do we mean by style? This refers to word choice, the sentence structure, and the tone. Whatever invite that you will be expected to write, you also have to be mindful of your word choice. You also have to be mindful of the sentence structure and the tone. Remember, when you spoke about the register, we also included the purpose and the audience. So that, to that extent, will inform or will dictate the word choice. It will also dictate the sentence structure as well as the tone. The content of the invitation determines the choice of language. So there are certain things that you need to avoid when you write an invitation. You've got to avoid slang and colloquial language. You also need to avoid contractions, abbreviations, and acronyms, because this is a formal piece. Let's have a look at that example of an invite. Join us for a 50th birthday celebration in honor of Isabel Hyde. The date is given there, which is Sunday, the 21st of November, 2024. The time is 17 hours. The venue, Sun City Super Bowl in Rustenburg. The dress code is black and white. And we are also being given the RSVP details there. And you are expected to do that by the 6th of November 2024. The contact person there is Kosi at 061 22 40789, or an email address for Kosi, which is kosi@gmail.com. That is one example of an invitation card, which has all the necessary information needed in this case. Right. Let's move on to another example of an invitation. This one, the nature of the event is a wedding celebration. And it comes from Romeo and Juliet. It reads as follows. Romeo and Juliet cordially request the pleasure of your company on the joyous occasion of their marriage at the King's Palace, 222 Struben Street in Johannesburg. The date there is Saturday, the 14th of February 2024, and the time is also indicated at 14 hours. Additional information is also included there. Remember, we said that any other important information can be included in your invite. And in this case, we have information regarding the ballroom. It says the reception will take place in the ballroom at the King's Palace at 19 hours. And for the reception, the dress code is formal. There's also additional information there. Please note, to give all the guests the opportunity to celebrate in style, we politely request that no children should attend the reception. RSVP should be done before the 30th of December 2024 to Sibongile at 09389 42570. That is another example of an invite that we can have. If you look at it, it has all the necessary information, the nature of the event, the date, the venue, the time, the dress code, RSVP is also there, as well as additional information. So, what are the must-have in an invite? The type of function, date, venue, time. You also need to include RSVP contact details to confirm attendance. You also need to include the dress code. The language should be suitable for the text. Now we're moving on to category B. We are done with category A of section C. Remember, we said this category is made up of diary entries, short message systems, e.g., WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, etc. Let's have a look at the diary entry. A diary entry portrays the daily events and feeling of a person. It is a personal piece of writing where one's experience, emotions, thoughts are recorded and provide opportunity to pour out. So it's more personal. In a diary, that is how you would record your emotions, your feelings, and everything. So, how to write a diary entry? There must be a date or a day or both. They've got to be written at the top of the entry. You've got to provide salutation. You may provide a specific name, Dear Kitty, Dear Jane. The entry needs to be in the first person. Diary entry needs to be written in the present tense. unless events already happened. Use simple sentences and short paragraphs. Remember, even with section A and section B, you were advised not to use long sentences, because if you use long sentences, chances are that they might lose the meaning that you wanted to convey to the reader. So use simple and short paragraphs. Use emotive language to express opinions and feelings. Informal language is acceptable, but not slang. Let's have a look at that tip for diary entry. Make sure of the number of diary entries that you have to write. This is very, very important. Remember, this will be determined by the question. Therefore, read the brief carefully. It is important that you read the brief carefully, you analyze it, and you come up with key points. In this case, you've got to check if you are expected to write one diary entry or two entries. The number of words there, we have to have between 80 and 100 in total, regardless of the number of entries that you have. What do we mean by that? It doesn't mean that if you are requested to have two entries, then you can have 100 words in one entry and 100 words in the other entry. No. When we say the number of words has to be between 80 and 100, that means regardless of how many entries you are expected to write, it be one entry, still has to be 100, between 80 and 100. If it's two entries, still the same, between 80 and 100. Three entries, still the same, between 80 and 100. So the number of entries has no influence on the total number of words that you are expected to write. It still boils down to 80 to 100 words. Must be written in the first person, and you've got to use words that describe feelings, words that describe emotions. Make sure of the number of diary entries that you have to write. That is what I have just said. And the total number of words, it has to be done in the first person, and you've got to describe feelings and emotions. Use synonyms for happy or sad, and prepare adjectives to describe your emotions. You don't have to use happy throughout your entry. I was happy because of this. I was happy. I was sad. You've got to use synonyms, but also prepare a number of adjectives that you can use to describe your emotions. That is very, very key. That is what will make the language rich. Language must be simple and informal, no slang, that is gonna, wanna, or cool, that is slang. So we don't expect to see that in your piece. Let's have a look at a checklist for diary entries. You remember we spoke about the checklist earlier when we were doing a flyer and a poster and we went through that? So we also have a checklist for diary entries. You can also, with the help of your teacher, design one for yourself. So this will actually assist you to see if you have really responded well to the brief. Remember the first question? Have you responded to the brief? Yes. How well? And we said that the how well will be assisted by the checklist. If you have covered everything that is requested in the checklist, that would mean that you have answered it well. It would be exceptional. or maybe very good. Right, let's go through that checklist. We've got the first item there that addresses the date or the day, which should appear on the top of each entry. You check if you have captured that in your piece. If you do have it, you'll tick yes. If you don't have it, you'll tick a no and write a comment. The entry has a salutation. You look at that piece. Did you include a salutation? The entries are in the first person. You also check against that. The present tense is used except for the events in the past. That has to be checked as well. Informal language but not slang is used. So you check if you have not used slang. If you have, that has to be underlined and that has to be put in the comment section. Emotive language expresses opinions and feelings. Have you used emotive language to express opinions as well as feelings? So that checklist will assist you in seeing to it that you answer or you respond well to the brief. Right, let's move on to category C of section C, which is the last category there. And that is directions and instructions. Let's have a look at directions. We use directions to tell someone how to get somewhere. I'm not too sure if today we still use, a set of instructions to direct someone, because I know most of you use Google Maps, so we no longer are using or writing a set of instructions where we would direct a person. But just in case that you find yourself without data and you can't even access your Google Maps, then you should be in a position to give someone directions. These days we're living in load shedding. If maybe you have not charged your phone for whatever reason, you still have to be able to give directions to someone in the absence of all of these gadgets that we are having in an age to make life easier for all of us. So, how will you then direct that person? How to write directions? You've got to be very concise and clear. Directions must be in chronological order. Refer to a specific direction. You need to indicate the distance in meters or in kilometers. You need to give information on landmarks along the way. That is what you need to include there. What words are you expected to use in giving directions? So these are the words that you can use indicating direction. It increases your vocab. You've got to drive. You're either driving or walking, remember? So you've got to drive or you walk down Smith Street, for argument's sake. Or you drive on Mandela Driveway. And you walk past, then you would come up with the landmark there. You walk past a hospital on your left-hand side. Follow the signs to McDonald's or any other landmark that you can use. Walk in an easterly direction. You turn left you name whatever street. And you can also say drive in the direction of, right? Depending what landmark would you love to use. Some of the words indicating directions also include this one. At the second intersection, turn left into PW Street. The next one says, cross over the third set of traffic lights. Many a times you write, instead of saying cross over the third set of traffic lights, many of you write jump the robot. And that is an error there. You cannot jump the robot. Instead of robot, we use traffic light. Instead of jumping, you cross over the third set of traffic lights. Are we now getting it? Yes. The road curves to the left of, then you will indicate the landmark that you would love to use there. And where the road forks, keep right or keep left. You pass the blue building on your left hand side, and many more phrases that you can use, but those are the standard ones that will make it easy for you to give directions, especially in the absence of your gadgets, which normally helps you to direct your friends and send some location. Let's have a look at example of directions. You have to guide your friend on how to get to the community library from your school. Write down the directions from your school to the community library. Remember to include landmarks. That's the question. That's the brief. So let us see, how will you go about that? Possible answer, there it is. From the school, drive in a westerly direction in 6th Street. At the intersection where 6th and Health Streets cross, go straight. You see the use of street names. You pass the hospital on the right hand side. The hospital there is our landmark. And it will be on the right hand side. You drive for 500 meters. The distance is indicated until you reach the T junction. At the T junction, use the right lane to turn right into Pearl Street and then turn left into City Street. At the next intersection, turn right into the Library Street. The entrance will be on the left-hand side. That's a possible answer. You would have employed all the necessary landmarks that you need to, the distance. You have also used the street names. So surely if you can give someone this kind of a direction, that person will never get lost. Let's have a look at the points to note regarding direction. The direction may be in either point or paragraph 4. Directions must be in the correct chronological order. Remember, we're trying to direct someone to get to a particular destination. So we don't want them to get lost because of the way we have arranged our points. They need to be in the correct chronological order. There must be a start and there must be a finish. Use the correct vocabulary when giving directions. You've got to use the landmarks, you've got to use distances, you've got to use tense as well. So all of that must be included. Know the difference between meters and kilometers. There's no way that you can ask a person to walk for 250 kilometers. So you must know when to use that. Right, let's have a look. Remember, for section C, category C, we've got directions and instructions. So let's move on to instructions. When do we give instructions? We give instructions when we describe how something should be done. We always give a set of instructions to people because we always want things to be done in a particular manner. And for that to be achieved, we need to give a set of instructions so that the person who needs to do the job will be able to carry it out appropriately. So let's have a look at instructions. When giving instructions, keep each instruction short and simple. Write each instruction as a step. Have only one main idea per step. You need to start every instruction with a verb. What is a verb? A doing word. Number every instruction. Write the instructions in sequence. So that is what you need to take note of when giving instructions. Keep each instruction short and simple. Write each instruction as a step. Have only one main idea per step. Start each instruction with a verb. Number every instruction. And lastly, write the instructions in sequence. We will take a short break for now and we'll come back shortly. Thank you very much. Done all the three categories of section C, I would like us to look at areas of concern now for this section. Remember, the aim is for us to get 20 out of 20, which I said we can do it, right? Yes. So what are the areas of concern? Failure to read and follow instructions. Many a times, for whatever reason, you don't read the instructions, you don't follow the instructions, and that on its own disadvantages you. The length of writing, failure to adhere to the required length. We said for this section, you are expected to write from 80 to 100 words. That is the required length. You cannot go beyond that. If you go beyond that, it will also compromise your performance in that regard. The handwriting. Yeah, I know. Some of you, your handwriting is very difficult to read. And if one cannot read your work, chances are that that on its own is a disadvantage. How will the marker, how will the teacher understand exactly what you would have written? So you need to improve on your handwriting. Not being able to relate to topics or the brief. That is the case where you would have misunderstood the brief, where you would have failed to analyze the brief and come up with key facts and then be able to respond well to the brief. Repeated ideas. You should guard against repeating the brief. That is very important. Don't repeat the brief in your response. Failure to cancel the first or the rough draft. Always cancel the first draft or the rough draft. Wrong formats used in response to section B and C questions. So those are the areas of concern. And what are the suggestions for improvement? How can we improve on those concerns? Remember, there's always room for improvement because we are aiming at getting 20 out of 20. Adhere, as simple as that. Adhere to the required length. If it says 80 to 100, adhere to the length. Follow instructions. E.g., if the instruction says provide a title, simple, provide the title. Respond to the brief. That is key. You need to be able to read the brief, analyze the brief, come up with key words from the brief, and then respond to the brief. Remember, we said the checklist will guide you in terms of how well you would have responded to the brief. Do editing in ink. Write legibly. I spoke about that handwriting that is very difficult to read. If we need to do some kind of improvement, you've got to write legibly. Pay attention to spelling. Pay attention to punctuation. Know where to put a full stop, where to put a comma, where to put an exclamation mark, and punctuate your work accordingly. Avoid using slang. Use the correct way of breaking off words at the end of a line. Include number and title again when writing the final piece. Refrain from using a slash between a choice, e.g., his slash her. You've got to decide which one are you going to use throughout your piece. You either choose to use his or you choose her, she or he, but you cannot use both in one text. Let's have a look at the recommendations. What is it that is recommended so that we improve on our performance in this paper? You need to practice planning properly and efficiently. How so? By using past papers to practice. That is very important. You need to practice. If you don't practice, you won't master the paper. Choose a topic that appeals to you. Choose something that you can relate to. Choose something that you know something about. That will enable you to say something, to respond well to the brief. Plan the response using mind maps or diagrams. You've got to plan your work. Keep the target audience in mind constantly. The target audience. You need to keep that in mind because the language will be influenced by the audience. Remember, we spoke about the register and the style? Yes, that will be influenced by the audience. Finish the transactional with an intriguing conclusion. Those are the recommendations. And I'm sure you can implement them. Each and every one of you can implement this recommendation. It's very easy to do that, by the way. All that you need to do is to practice. Edit the writing piece thoroughly. Check it at least 3 times. Right. Let's have a look at the general topics. Remember, section C is the last section of paper 3. So what are the general comments regarding this paper? The first one is in connection with the topics. Read and analyze topics. Analyze the text. Identify keywords and stick to the guidelines given. I cannot overemphasize this. Length of writing. Whether it's an essay, stick to the required length of an essay. Stick to the required length of a longer transactional piece. Stick to the required length of a shorter transactional piece. So you've got to read and adhere to the instructions. That is very, very important. Slang language. The use of slang language is not allowed across the sections, whether section A, B, or C. You cannot use that. Do not use a noun and a pronoun in the same sentence. What do we mean by that? E.g., the mother, she. You cannot use a noun and a pronoun in the same sentence. Format. Section B and section C. That is where most of you experience challenges regarding the format. So use correct formats in section B as well as section C. And you can only use correct formats if you learn different types for different text. No contractions may be used in a formal writing across the sections, whether in an essay, longer transactional text, or a shorter transactional text. No contractions that one should use in a formal writing. Avoid writing too long sentences. Too long sentences, you end up not writing exactly what you want to write. The meaning get lost in between. Cancel the rough work or the first draft. And generally, formats for transactional writing pieces are still a problem. Year in, year out, when you read the report from the roadshow, formats are still a problem. So how do we solve this problem? There's only one way. You've got to study all formats. All formats, e.g., you've got to study the format of the letter to the editor, you've got to study the format of a dialogue, speech, of a diary entry, of an obituary, you've got to study a format of an invite. Everything has to be studied. We cannot use one format for all transactional text. Where you find that the brief requires you to write a dialogue, but you use the format of a speech. That's the wrong format. This is very important. Utilize all the available resources. You've got Mind the Gap, you've got live broadcasts, You've got SIP material. You also have online lessons, and you also have creative writing study guides. Wow. So many resources that are made available to you. All that you need to do is to utilize them. You've got all the resources that would enable you to get 100 out of 100 in this paper. So utilize them. Remember, writing is a learned skill. So we need to practice and practice and practice. Why? Because practice makes perfect. So let's do it now. Let's practice. Let's look at section C and do this activity. A shorter transactional text which forms our question 3. And these are the instructions for that text. Let us quickly go over the instructions. You've got to choose one of the following topics and write a short transactional text. The body of your response should be between 80 and 100 words in length. Write down the number and the heading of the text you have chosen, e.g. 3.1 diary entries. Spend approximately 30 minutes on this section. Those are the instructions that you need to follow. Simple and straightforward. They're not difficult to carry. Just carry those instructions and that would give you more marks. Number 3.1 is an invitation. That is our brief. Let's read it. Let's have a look at it and try to read it aloud. Your older brother or sister is turning 21. Write the invitation you will send to family and friends to attend the party that is being organized. Right, when you look at that invitation, other aspects are given. You've got the given aspects there. Right, let's have a look at it. It says your older brother or sister, not both. So it means you've got to choose. What about the brother? What about the sister? Is turning 21. So what is given in that sentence? The type of function is also given. Then the second sentence says, write the invitation you will send to, that is the audience, to family and friends. For what? To attend the party that is being organized. So wow, we are organizing a party here. A 21st birthday party. So the type of function is clear. It's given in that brief. Then you've got to write the invite to and send it to family and friends. Nice. Then you then say, okay, I'm going to choose my brother or I'm going to choose my sister. Meaning that throughout your invite, if there's anything that you would love to write referring to your brother, you cannot mix them. You can't write brother stroke sister. No. So already you have the given aspects. You've got the type of the function, a 21st birthday party, a 21st birthday celebration. So what is it that you need to include? Remember the checklist that I spoke about earlier? You need to include now, when you do the brainstorming, you need to think of the date. You need to think of the venue. You need to think of the time. You also need to include RSVP. Yes, RSVP, that is the contact person for confirmation of attendance. You also need to, yes, you also need to include the dress code. And lastly, you need to check if the language is suitable for the text. Remember, vocabulary informs language, language determines the tone. So you need to check that. So are you ready to start writing your invitation? Yes, you've got all the necessary key points, the must have in an invite. And I would love to believe that you've taken note of that. And at the end of the lesson, each and every one of you will be writing that invitation. Are we all good with that? All right, good. Right, let's move on to, we're still on our to-do activities. Diary entry. What is it that we are expected to do here? Okay, let's have a look at the brief. What does it say? You have been selected to host a learner from another country as part of an exchange program. You had mixed emotions about this visit, and you decided to write your feelings in your diary. Let's try to analyze that brief. The first thing that we are being told is that you have been selected to do what? To host a learner. Is this learner from your school? No. Where is this learner? From another country. Why is he coming over? He's coming to your country as part of an exchange program. So what does that say to you? You have not met this learner. You have not seen this learner before. You don't even know this learner. And he comes from another country. Sure. You had mixed emotions about this visit and you decided to write your feelings in your diary. It is very important that you know that you had mixed emotions. So you had conflicting emotions. You felt happy, you felt sad, good and bad, excited, disappointed. So you had all those mixed emotions about this visit. And then you decided to write your feelings in your diary. Okay. Is that brief complete? Now, is the instruction clear? Do you know from here how many entries you've got to write? Let's see. Oh, there comes the instruction. Write 2 diary entries. The first entry must indicate how you felt before the visit, and the second entry must express how you felt after the visit. Remember, you had mixed emotions about the visit. And now you are expected to write how many entries? 2 diary entries. And what must you write about in the first one? The first entry must indicate how you felt before. Before what? Before the visit. Right? And the second entry must express how you felt after. After what? After the visit. So our brief is now complete and clear. The instruction is very clear. How many entries do we need to have there? 2 entries. The length thereof still between 80 and 100. Remember, you don't have to say the first entry is going to be 100, the second entry also 100. No. Both entries, the length thereof must be between 80, 200. What else do you need to include there when you do your brainstorming? The format, yeah. A day or the date must be included for both entries. You also need to include the or provide the salutation, the entry to be in the first person, remember? And lastly, you've got to use emotive language. Use words that describe feelings or emotions. You remember we said earlier, you've got to use synonyms for sad, synonyms for happy, and try to get adjective to describe your emotions. So we're done with this one. Clearly outlined. I'm sure you are also ready to sit and start writing this diary entry. That is the second activity that you need to do after this lesson. I hope we are all on the same page. Unless there are questions, I have not yet noted any questions from the interactive number. So that says to me, you are all okay. You understand exactly what is expected of you. Yes, thank you so much. Then let's move on to the last question, which is a set of instructions. Let's have a look at the brief. You attended an important meeting hosted by the city of Tshwane. You were briefed on how to save electricity as the country may face severe load shedding. These are the times that we find ourselves in, load shedding. And because you attended this important meeting, which was hosted by the city of Tshwane, where they briefed you on how to save electricity, you thought this is something that is very good. So you want to write out instructions to be followed by your classmate or your schoolmates to save electricity. You want to share the good news that you have heard from that meeting on how to save electricity. So the heading there would be how to save electricity. Instructions on how to save electricity. That is what is expected of you from this. The brief is very straightforward. Give set of instructions on how to save electricity, kind of instructions that you would give to your schoolmates or your classmates, um, giving them some kind of feedback from the meeting that you attended, which was hosted by the city of Tshwane. And I think that brings us to the end of the lesson. Not unless there are some questions, but from the look of things, there aren't any questions that have registered on the interactive number. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day and finish off your activities. Bye.